All right, so Fauvism is characterized by the things that I have bulleted here on the PowerPoint. So explosive colors and blunt brushwork, the juxtaposition of colors that are opposite on the color wheels, so they have a disharmonious color scheme, blatant disregard for local color, study in the psychological of color juxtapositions, no white or black. Artists who were popular during this time were Matisse, Marquette, and Roulet. Fauvism itself meant wild beast. It's still regarded art as a precious object. They formed a group that opposed the official Paris Salon. They simplified objects and schematized them. They tended to paint things that were pleasant, and the bright colors tend to flatten the space in terms of value variation. So in the summer of 1905, André Derain leaves for Paris for a 2-month stay with his friend Henri Matisse. They settle in a small fishing town of Collier. It's on the southwest coast of France near the Spanish border. The painters had first met in Carrier's Paris studio. Matisse's encouragement, Derain wanted to pursue a career in art and art theory. He paints canvases that are filled with bright light color. They were exuberant with broken brushwork, which also interested Matisse. Along with another artist named Maurice de Valmenic, there were major proponents of short-lived movement known as Fauvism. Movement was termed Fauves, which means wild beast. It was attached to the artists because there was a show, and during that show, an art critic coined the works of art Fauvist. The initial show of this type of work shocked and offended most of the viewers. In 1905, they exhibited at the Salon in Paris and were rejected by the Parisians. Matisse and Derain worked closely together in the small fishing village, but their styles did not overlap each other. They remained distinct to themselves. So when you look at Derain's work, you can see a difference in his work versus Matisse's work, partially because Derain mostly sticks to landscapes. His works of art have people in them, but they tend to be busy doing things. He really liked movement in his art, André Derain did. And so his work tends to be more rhythmic. The lines and colors tend to rotate in a more regular pattern. His palette is Fauvist. It has a vibrant and unnatural feeling to it. He was somewhat dissatisfied with his painting, and you could kind of feel it in terms of tension because the colors are opposite on the color wheel. The brushwork has a sense of division to it that makes the painting feel flat and as if he's relying heavily on the outline to create the image distinction. So you see that the sky has an outline for the clouds. The mountain here is outlined at the edge of the green with a darker blue. You can see that the ships tend to be outlined with the bright brown and then the blue that goes next to the sail. Derain eventually decides he wants to turn away from Fauvism's ideas and go on to produce more monochromatic works like the Cubists. This is another one of Derain's works where he is exploring the landscape and the mountains. You can see how he relies on that outline between the orange and the blue to create the shape of the mountain, as well as the short broken brushwork in the foreground of the picture plane to create the trees and the grass. Valmanek was a self-taught painter. He really had this unbridled passion for spontaneity. And so he wanted straightforward forms, things that were pretty plain in terms of the object itself. So the sailboat, he doesn't put in all the detail of the boat. He just simply creates the shape. He liked basic hues to express his feelings. He said, I try to paint with my heart and my guts without worrying about style. The Parisian art dealer Ambrose Villard purchased Valmanek's existing stock of paintings in 1906. And he was able to then devote himself fully to painting after André Villard purchased a large body of his work. He spends the summer of 1906 around the area in which Van Gogh paints. He really admired Van Gogh. He liked the fact that he combined primary colors like blue in with white and red. And so Valmanek applies his colors directly on the canvas right out of the tube, thinking that he's going to get a more broken brushwork like Cézanne has. He's going to end up, we're talking about Van Gogh, aren't we? That he's going to end up with these nice bright colors that Van Gogh has. You can kind of see that here in this work of art if you think back to what Starry, Starry Night looks like. Starry, Starry Night combines yellow and blue and green and white to create a dynamic composition with movement. And you can see in Valmanek's work that he gets an overall sense of movement. Definitely nothing like Derain gets in terms of color placement and rhythm. But you definitely can see a sense of movement within the broken brushwork. You get this sense of direction, even though things don't feel like they're moving swiftly like we see in the works of art by Van Gogh. Well, the main leader of the Fauves was Henri Matisse. Matisse says what characterizes Fauvism was that we rejected imitative colors and that with pure colors we obtained stronger reactions. He was the leader of the Fauves, and he believed that colors should be a major communication of meaning in a work of art, and it should serve as a form of expression, that art should form as a form of expression. He was a painter, sculptor, draftsman, and printmaker. He was continually searching for the same things which I have perhaps realized by different means. He was continually searching for new ways to present things, for new ways to communicate. He was celebrated as both an orchestrator of tonal harmonies, and he was a draftsman capable of distilling a form to its essentials. He long sought a way to unite color and line in his work. He was born in 1869 in a town in which the linen and weaving industry was the main industry. He was raised nearby that town in Bohine, which was famous for its luxury fabrics. This early exposure to textiles shapes his visual language, and I'll show you the work of art that I'm thinking of that really makes a difference for him in terms of textiles. He had a collection of textiles in terms of art. They were in the forms of carpets and cloths, and he collected them from all over the world, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and they would deeply inform him in terms of, or deeply influence him in terms of color and pattern and composition. He really explored. Okay, so this is Henri Matisse's The Joy of Life. It is a large pastoral landscape that depicts the Golden Age. The figures appear flat due to the fact that they don't have a lot of value variation. There is no specific light source, and all the colors are highly chromatic. The other thing he does is explore the relationship between line and color, just as we saw in the dance. Only here, it's a little bit more sophisticated, it's a little bit more daring, and the figures are a little bit more detailed. You can see a couple at the front of the picture plane. There's a sense of distortion of spatial reasoning between the figures. He emphasizes expressive color, meaning that he utilizes the color to communicate what he's trying to get you to look at in the work of art. He's drawing on the folk art tradition, that's the use of unmodeled form and strong outline. Colors are highly expressive, and the goal of the Fauvists was to shock the viewer when they looked at the art, and so he does this pretty well in terms of subject matter as well as color and composition. The Paris Salon, like I told you before, rejects the art of the Fauvists. This is a portrait of Matisse's wife. She sits in the typical manner for a portrait from the time, but the colors that he uses seem to be random, and they're meant to startle the viewer. You can see that she has a confrontational look on her face, and Matisse handles the paint and textures in a rough way. They're sort of quickly applied, and they're done so in sections so that the areas feel somewhat chunky. The way he handles paint, line, and texture in this composition are very confrontational. They have a jagged sense to them. They tend to move the eye around the canvas, and they have a complete disregard for local color, but also Matisse is responding to the fact that she's wearing something with color on it, and that the color is reflecting in the light off of her skin. In 1908, Matisse writes, "The basis of my thinking has not changed, but my very thinking has evolved, and my means of expression have followed on." This idea of a new way of seeing is something that Matisse sticks to wholeheartedly. We talked about his influence of being born in an area or living in an area that is highly influenced in textiles and in textile manufacturing. This image is where I think all of his research and color, all of his study and how line and color reacts, culminates into an apex in his work. You can see the table and the wall are painted in the exact same color. While the tablecloth seems to have some sense of dimension, in that the pattern seems to crawl up and backward. In addition to, he has some things that are sitting on the table that help to define the plane of the table as receding into space. However, when you look solely at the linear work and the composition, the linear work fools the eye enough to think that the composition is fairly flat. In addition to the addition of the window, that is green, tends to pull the viewer's eye backward. Without that flat green area, your eye would not be able to comprehend the fact that this pattern is a pattern that recedes into space and that the table actually is a table. The line work, I believe he's looking at fabric and how the fabric reacts, how the pattern on the fabric reacts to moving backward into space. You can see that here again, he relies a lot on the definition of the positive and negative definition of space. So you've got this organic looking scrolly line that goes along the painting in blue, and then the red touches the scrolly line and helps that negative space feel curvilinear. The woman who is the subject of the painting, which I suppose is arguable. You could argue that the subject of the painting is actually the line work. But the woman who sits the vases on the tablecloth defines the edge of the table. Without her and the yellow chair that recedes into space, you would once again not be able to tell that this tablecloth recedes into space. Every single thing that Matisse has used or added into the painting has a very specific purpose design-wise. Without those objects being there, what Matisse was trying to communicate would not come forth visually. The year that he creates this, he turns a motif common in his works, which is a room decorated with vases, fruits, and flowers, into a more complex subject matter by exploring these different formal elements within his compositions. The artist himself calls this a decorative panel and not a painting. It was intended for a dining room in a Moscow mansion of a famous Russian collector. And I want you to remember that without André Villard or some of the other contemporary collectors of art, the artists that were exploring new ways of looking at things would not have been as successful. In order to be an artist that has a unique voice and makes a contribution to the history of art, or to art and its history, a collector has to have enough buying power to make it a collectible theory or thought process. Same way with the antique market. People have to all of a sudden create a drive for the kind of art or the kind of antiques that they wish to collect. Without the collector, the artist, without the patron, does not make the kind of headway in art that he wants to.